on a Wednesday night. You know, we used to have church on Wednesday night all the time. We didn't. We had church on Tuesday night and Friday night. Uh, but anyway, and church wasn't from 7 to 8 or whatever. It was from 7 to 10, maybe later, if everybody got to shouting and praising God, okay? So how many here were raised in church? All right. How many messages have you heard? I've probably heard thousands, okay? My dad used to, because I got out of school, I always wanted to go. He took me to all the Bible conferences, all the conventions, all the fellowship meetings, everything. He took me to everything. So we was in church 2 or 3 times a week, or 4 times a week, 5 times sometimes. And I heard some great messages and heard some bad ones during my career growing up. And I went to church so much I got the Bible by osmosis. Okay, heard it so much. A little story. Years ago, back in the 50s, there was the superintendent of the Pentecostal Church of God was named M.F. Corrin. And when he was talking about our story previously, he was a young child. He stuttered so bad he couldn't hardly talk, and his mother took him under her wing and loved on him, and that was back before air conditioning, of course. And so one day he run in the kitchen and told his mother, "God called me to preach." And it was hot, and she was tired and frustrated, and she said, "You can't even talk, let alone preach." And he said it devastated him. But anyway, he became one of the greatest preachers I ever heard. He would start a story, and then he would preach for 15 minutes, and he would start and finish the story and start another one. So he kept you hooked for that 15 minutes while you waited for the rest of the story, as what's his name used to do, okay? All right. So let's start off with some cheerleading tonight. I'm going to say, "Are you fired up?" And you say, "Fired up." And then I'm going to say, "Are you fired up and ready to go?" And you're going to say, "Ready to go." Can we do that? Okay. Let's be enthusiastic about it, okay? Have you ever been to a football game? You know, we used to go to those football games, and the team on this side and the cheerleaders and the students would say, "Oh, we have spirit. How about you?" Do y'all do that one? All right. So, are you fired up? Are you fired up and ready to go? All right. I'm ready tonight. All right. Tommy was pitching for his Little League baseball team, and they were behind 14-0. All the parents were encouraging the team. Tommy's mother yelled, "Don't get discouraged." Tommy answered back, "How can I be discouraged? It is only the first inning." So sometimes we get discouraged and we're just getting started good, okay? And then back during the Revolutionary War, a captain of a ship that was severely damaged was asked by the enemy to surrender. I think his name was John Paul Jones. And he answered back, "I've not yet begun to fight." So that's the way we need to be. We all get attacked. We all have temptations. We all have life that just happens to us. And I've not yet begun to fight. So anyway, so the last time I talked, the clock quit running, so I apologize for talking so long last time, okay? I'll make sure it was running tonight, all right? Because I looked at the clock and talked for a while, and I looked back, and it was still 15 till. Anyway, so I talked about what is the plan? What is the plan? And I don't know your name. Yeah. Okay. What was your dream when you were a teenager or a young man? What was your dream that you wanted to do more than anything else? You know, people have trouble with that question, including myself. All right. All right. How about you? What was your dream when you were a truck driver? Did you succeed? All right. I like success. So anyway, What do you want to be? Yes. All right. All right. So we all have our dreams and what we want to be in life. Some of us get it done. Some of us don't. Moses' vision was to deliver his people from bondage. That was his vision. And when he was 40 years old, he decided to take it in hand and killed an Egyptian and had to run for his life. That was the calling and purpose God had on his life, but he tried and started a little too soon, right? God hadn't completely got him oriented and trained at that point. So vision, whatever your vision is, whatever your dream is, without revelation is useless. If you don't know how to do and get done what your dream is, no matter how old you are or how young you are, it won't happen. It just won't happen. So along with God giving you purpose, a dream, a vision, whatever you want to call it, you need for God to give you understanding and knowledge and wisdom and revelation. Okay? So tonight my theme is, what are you building? There were two guys back in the 1500s that were working on a cathedral. And this guy came by, walked by, and stopped and began to talk to them. And he asked one guy, he said, what are you doing? He said, I'm laying block. He said, okay. And he asked the other guy, said, what are you doing? He said, I'm building a cathedral. So our perspective of what we're doing is very important. Some of us look at life as mundane, boring, tough, and it can be all those things. But some of us look at, no matter what it is, we look at it as we're doing something great. We all have greatness in us. All of us have greatness in us. We were born with greatness, and it never leaves us. Sometimes we suppress it, and things get in our way, and we don't get going too early. The thing I wanted to do, I didn't start till I was, trying to think how old I was, 60, I think, okay? But God prepared me all those years to do that and give me the talents to do what I needed to do to fulfill the purpose of my life. So what are you doing? Are you laying brick or are you building cathedral? Okay? So an architect description is a person who is qualified to design buildings and to plan and supervise their construction. How many here has worked in construction? A long time, okay? When I first started out as an apprentice, you worked under a journeyman, and he would tell you what to do, and you had no concept. He told you to run this pipe from that point to that point, or put those lights in. You had no concept of what the finished product would look like. You was just doing what you were told. But as I progressed through my career and worked my way up to project management and oversaw the whole job, no matter how big it was, you had to have a vision of what the finished product would look like. So if I told the guys what I needed them to do, some of them say, I don't understand, and I would tell them, I understand you don't understand. But the reason you're doing this is because we're going to have a finished product here, and you have to do certain things to get the product to be as designed. So that's the way our life is with God sometimes. We don't understand, actually, what God is asking us to do. It seems so simplistic sometimes, and it seems like it doesn't fit in with everything that's going on but he's trying to get us to understand we need to do this, and then when the building is finished, we'll understand why we did what we did. Okay? So, the Bible said we're what? The temple of God, right? Temple of God. So, when Moses and them come out of the land of Egypt, how many know the story of the children of Israel's journey from bondage to the promised land? Okay? Not everybody, okay. So, sometimes it's difficult if you just skip over stuff to get people to understand. Okay, so the Bible said we are the temple of God. We're where God dwells, right? God lives in us. He told us, as I said the other night, the kingdom of God is near us, around us, and in us. So everywhere we go, we have the Spirit of God. And we know that God is everywhere, omnipresent, everywhere. So where God is holy, as I said the other night. God is holy. So when we are the temple of God, everywhere we go, we're on holy ground. We're on holy ground. And I love that. So, what is your building designed for? I love the song you sang about the lighthouse, okay? And we talked about the point of light. So, she talked about the lighthouse, and we're all supposed to be lighthouses to keep people from being destroyed, right, and damaging their lives. We're supposed to give them light and illumination so they can understand and see the dangers that they're going into and try to help them avoid destruction in their life. Sometimes it's very difficult. In 2006, when I started a nonprofit for substance abuse, there was a little girl, well, she was a lady. She was about this tall. Her name was Rose. And we started a Tuesday night deal, and we had people, we started off with nobody for 2 or 3 Tuesday nights, and then we fed them pizza, and so we had 8 people, and feed people that always come out. And then my wife started cooking and bringing dinner to us on Tuesday nights, and Rose was sitting at eating, and I went over and said, "Hello, Rose, how are you today?" She said, "Don't you dare talk to me." Used a few cuss words. And while I'm eating, okay? So that was my introduction to Rose. Rose today has not progressed at all. We tried everything. We put her in housing. We took care of her. We got her dogs. We did everything for her, and she continues to sabotage her life. She never sees the lighthouse, and her life is in continual destruction. Sad thing, sad thing. So, we're the temple of God. We're a point of light. And we're all those things. We might be a lot of different things that God has designed us for. Some people are designed to sing, okay? I'm not. Some people are designed, they can build buildings. They can mow the lawn. They can cook. They can do, some people have the gift of hospitality. I love that gift because they always are doing something to make you happy and feeding you. So I love people that have the gift of hospitality. And there's a lot of that in this church, isn't there? I think as you call her, Pastor T, has that gift of hospitality. She's always doing something, isn't she? And she doesn't mind calling you to help. I noticed that too, which is a wonderful thing. I'm sure everybody here loves her. Okay, I do. And anyway, so God called Moses to lead the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. A short history of them, Abraham was born. He had sons and daughters and all those things, and then grew, and his son had a son and named Jacob, and then he had 12 sons, and then one of his sons was sold as a slave and ended up in Egypt, and he ended up as prime minister and stored up and averted people starving to death during the famine, okay? And so all the people that moved there originally to Egypt was 76 souls, I believe, and they grew to like 1 million people. And another Pharaoh that took the kingship of Egypt, he put them in bondage because they got scared of them, afraid there were so many that if they got attacked, they would join the enemy and defeat them. So they were in slavery for 400 years. And at one time, they required that if you had a boy child, that you throw him in the river. And also, according to history, it's not in the Bible, you were given a quota of bricks every day to lay. And if you didn't get those bricks laid, they took one of your children and made you put him in the wall, cement him in the wall. I'm sorry. Okay? But God had a design for them. They were his chosen people. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, except for this. How many have grandchildren? Okay, put your hands down. How many have, don't raise your hand. How many have a favorite grandchild? We try not to have favorites, but we all do, right? And we love all of our grandchildren. You got one, so that is a favorite, right? So of all of our grandchildren, we have one favorite. And I was so privileged, my second grandchild was a beautiful little girl, and her mother let us keep her a lot, and she went with us all the time, so we had the privilege of raising her a lot. And so that was a wonderful thing. So can you imagine having to take your grandchild, put him in a wall, and cement him in because you didn't meet your quota that the slave master had for you? It's kind of like that with our lives. There's two kingdoms, God's kingdom and Satan's kingdom. And you're in one kingdom or the other, and if you're in Satan's kingdom, he will try to destroy everything you have. So you need to switch kingdoms. Okay? So God's plan was this. He told Abraham that he would give them the land of Canaan, his descendants, his children, his children's children. And so God's plan was to take these people that were slaves, and I thought, God, there was surely an easier way you could have done that than make them be slaves for 400 years and all that. But God said, I wanted them to see my miracles. I wanted them to see my grace. I wanted them to see my power. I wanted them to see what I had actually prepared in them for what I had for them. Okay? So God, sometimes our life is a pit. I deal with people that are mostly addicted, in jail, have mental health issues such as schizophrenia, bipolar, anxiety, paranoia, all those things. So I deal with a lot of people that are just in total, complete chaos in their life. Total and complete chaos. And that's kind of the way these children of Israel were. They were in total, complete chaos. And when you see God take one of those individuals and heal them and deliver them and move into their life and see the change that happens to them, it is so overwhelmingly wonderful. I can't tell you. Phil's got a testimony like that. Right, Phil? So, anyway, so that's what God wanted to do, and he wanted them to see what he was able to do. The story of one guy, he's on my board now of my nonprofit, and he was a horrific alcoholic. We had a deal where people came every day, and he would come every day. He wore shorts, and he would be drunk, and he would walk through fields. I never understood why he did this. Walk through fields where there was bushes and stickers, and he'd cut his legs all up, and all those things. And the ladies there, they would get him in, they would baby him, and they would doctor his legs and fix him all up and feed him. And that went on for several months. And one night, we had a Tuesday night deal, as I said, and it was a spiritual class. One night, we asked people if they wanted prayer, and he come up, and so about, like y'all do here, about 7 or 8 of us gathered around him and prayed for him. And immediately, he was delivered. Never has wanted another drink, and his life has not been wonderful either. His wife has had a lot of issues. His life has not been wonderful, but he has not ever relapsed. I think this year is 12 years. Okay, 12 years. Great guy. And I love him very much. So, that's what God wants to do. That's his job. God's job is to deliver us, to take us from where we're at in slavery and bondage to whatever is in our life. If you're in bondage to some kind of substance abuse issue, if you're in bondage to paranoia, anxiety, all those things, God wants to help us through those things that we can enjoy our life at a very high level. So that's what God had designed for Moses, and it took him 80 years to get him ready. And I hope God gets me ready before I'm 80, but I don't have long to go. But anyway, so we see that God did that. So God did all the plagues and all those things, and finally Moses led the children of Israel out of Egypt, about 1 million of them, 660,000. Some people say 1.5 million. I don't know how many there were, but there were a lot of people. Now, if you're a guy taking all these slaves out of a place where they lived, out of a place where all their cattle was, and all that, and take all that and just take them out in the wilderness and have enough water and food for them, that is quite a big deal that God would ask of you to do something like that. How can you manage 1 million people when they don't even have any water to drink? But you know, most of us haven't, I didn't see this till a few years ago. When Moses left Egypt, he went to Midian, and he went to work for his father-in-law, which he finally married one of these guys' daughters, excuse me. He became a shepherd, and he herded his sheep in the very wilderness where the children of Israel were going to go through. So he spent 40 years in that wilderness, and he knew every inch of that wilderness. Knew where all the water holes was. He knew where everything was in that wilderness. That's not putting down God's miracles that God did while they were in the wilderness, but Moses knew the wilderness. He was also knew education. He was highly educated. He was a general in Pharaoh's army. Led a lot of battles. So, here we go. Moses got all these children, all these people behind him. They're all rejoicing and having a good time and all that stuff. And then all of a sudden, boom, there's the Red Sea. On this side's the mountain, on this side's the mountain. And then all of a sudden, Pharaoh changed his mind. He's bringing all of his chariots, 600 chariots, and all of his army to take them back to Egypt. And they said, Moses, why did you bring us out here to die? Has God ever asked you to do something? And you just immediately run against some kind of brick wall. You say, God, I don't think you asked me to do anything. Why aren't you helping me? So Moses complained to God and said, what's going on here? God said, move forward. Get going. Hold up your rod. Okay? Do something. So he did, and the Red Sea rolled back, and we know they all went across on dry ground. I tried to calculate how long that took for 1 million people to walk across that space, and I don't think you could do it in less than 2 days without a miraculous intervention, but I don't know. Anyway, the Bible's so condensed you can't really tell how long it took them to go across. But anyway, when the final Israeli got across the Red Sea, then God removed the darkness from the army of Egypt, and they started chasing after them, and then immediately the sea destroyed them. Okay, now I want to get to what I want to say tonight. So from that point, it took 22 days to get to Mount Sinai. Now, God was waiting at Mount Sinai. How many people here, if your children are gone from home, if you're a parent, on Christmas when all your children or grandchildren come home, how many times are you standing at the door waiting on them, all excited? I'm waiting on them to get here. And when they get there, you're so excited, you run out to meet them. That's what God was. He was waiting on his children to get to Mount Sinai because he was going to come down and meet them face to face. He was excited about it. Took them 22 days to get there. When they got there, God come down on the mountain and he talked to them. They didn't actually get to see him, but he talked to them, told them what he expected, told them he loved them and all those things. And then he asked Moses to come up on the mountain and he wanted to converse with him. And so Moses went up on the mountain and God talked to him, gave him the 10 Commandments. But the main thing I want to talk about, God gave him and showed him a tabernacle in heaven, a temple that was in heaven, the way I understand the scriptures. And he showed Moses that tabernacle. He said, I want you to build me a tabernacle exactly like the one I'm showing you. So he gave Moses those instructions. He gave Moses those plans. If you're a construction person, you get a set of plans and you build it by those plans, and that's what Moses had. Then Moses said to the Israelites, and here's what I want you to get. See, the Lord has chosen Bezalel, maybe I mispronounced that, son of Uriah, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and he has filled him with the Spirit of God, with wisdom, with understanding, with knowledge, and with all kinds of skills, to make artistic designs for work in gold, silver, and bronze, to cut and set stones, to work in wood, to engage in all kinds of artistic crafts. And he has given both him and Eloab, son of Ahishamach, of the tribe of Dan, the ability to teach others. He has filled them with skill to do all kinds of work as engravers, designers, embroiderers, in blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and fine linen, and weavers, all of them skilled workers and designers. So here was all these people. God wanted a place to dwell. So he got 2 guys, and they had every skill that you need to do everything God wanted. Now, if they would have tried to build it by themselves, they would have not got it done. Now, also we know that God said to the children of Israel, he said there were captains over 5, there were captains over 10, there were captains over 100, and there were captains over 1,000. So I don't know what your position is, whether you're part of the 5, or part of the one that's leading the 5, or the 10, or the 50, or the 100, or the 1,000, okay? So most of us start out as one of the 5, right? And then we progress that we can be a leader of the 5. And then we learn how to lead 5, and then God promotes us and promotes somebody in the 5 to be and adds another person, okay? And that's why we progress through God's plan and God's kingdom to do. And so the Army has the ultimate platoon, I believe, of 10 people, and somebody over a platoon leader over those 10 people. So God has designed it not to lord over God's heritage or over God's people. I'm never to lord over anybody or think I'm better than anybody. I'm there to work with you, labors together with God. So these guys had all these skills. Now, I want you to understand that these people had been slaves in Egypt for 400 years. They built the Pharaoh's cities, palaces, all kinds of things. They were all kinds of different craftsmen that they had learned while they were slaves. I don't know what age you were committed to God and God's kingdom, but when you were just working in the world, you were learning things that God was planning on using when you stepped into his kingdom and started becoming a nation with other people. So these guys got all these people, and when they left Egypt, the Egyptians give them all kind of gold and silver and rings and all kind of everything. So they had, in a wilderness with no malls, nothing. They had all this money, okay? So God said, bring me some of your stuff. I want your earrings, your gold, whatever you want to bring. You don't have to bring it, but please bring it, and you can build me a tabernacle. So God gave us all these skills. And the tabernacle was built basically out of gold and brass and silver and fine linen. And they did all this and built this tabernacle for God. And 3 tribes on each side of the tabernacle. Judah, I think, was a tribe on the front side of the tabernacle because they led worship and did that. So, God has designed us and give us skills and things that we can build his kingdom. And what God's plan was for these people to become a nation. A nation. And he didn't just want them to be a nation, just to, he could say, these are my people. He wanted them to be an example and a guide to the rest of the nations in the world. And he wanted them to populate the world with the presence of God and the great things of God. But instead, they did what the other nations did. They were always getting in trouble. So if God has called you and gifted you and all that, be careful, because you'll be tempted to do what other people do. I had a friend, he's the same age I am. His dad was a superintendent of the East Texas District, which y'all are in now, back in the day. And he played the guitar. And he practiced hours and hours and hours a day. He liked Chet Atkins. Probably most of you never even heard of Chet Atkins. Okay. But he would play on one chord. If I went to his house, he'd drive me crazy because he'd play on one chord over and over and over and over and over and over and over till he got it perfect. How many here has heard the saying, practice makes perfect? It doesn't. Perfect practice makes perfect. If you just get out there and shoot hoops, if you're a basketball, it's like free throws. You just go out there and shoot them and shoot them and shoot them. You might get to be a 50, 60% free throw shooter. But if you learn the same motion, the same deal every time, and you practice till you can perfectly execute that motion every time you shoot a free throw, that's perfect practice. If you sing till you get the note just right, okay, when you practice. That's perfect practice. And that's what God wants us to be. He wants us to do those things. And so Del Rey, he's pastoring in California now. In the 1960, was offered $5,000 a week to come play in a rock and roll band. That was a lot of money in 1960, still to me. And he turned them down. Okay? So, God has designed us to be a nation. Okay? In the final analysis, he said, all the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our God. And it's our job to get them there. Okay? Now, he said, thy kingdom come, right? So, we try to get God's kingdom here now to influence all the nations of the world and all of our friends and all the cities and all those things. So, he does that. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them may be compared to a wise man who built his house on a rock. And the rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against that house, and it did not fall, for it had been founded on a rock. 85% of kids that are raised in church abandon God when they go to college. Why is that? We have not taught them how to construct a house that cannot be destroyed. We have not given them the tools to fight against the enemy. Okay? So they don't have an answer for a lot of the things that they run into because we hadn't provided it for them. I'm saying me, okay, not we. We hadn't provided it for them, so therefore they are deceived for a certain length of time. Okay? So it's our job to do that. Help our kids out. Give them that. One of the things, I'm not going to say that. Okay. There's a guy named Scott Harrison that I think it was about 10 years ago or 12 years ago. He was one of those guys in New York City that was I don't know what you really call him. But anyway, he went to the bars and people wanted him to, people that owned dealerships wanted him to drive their cars because he wore the Rolex watches and he bought all the drinks and he did all those things and he was a high level and they had parties all the time. And after a while, he became so empty, he said, I just can't live like this anymore. So he decided he would volunteer for a charity. He had a lot of money, and he was very talented, very charismatic. So he went to this charity and said, I'd like to volunteer. And so they said, well, tell us about yourself. And he did. They said, we don't want you. So he went to like 12 charities. Nobody would even let him volunteer. So finally he went to one and he said, I'll pay you $500 if you'll let me volunteer here. Okay? And so they did. And he somehow, they were connected with the mercy ships. Y'all familiar with the mercy ships that go overseas and do operations on people, especially kids that are deformed and all those kind of things, have cleft lips and those things. He went over there with them as a volunteer, and there was like 2,000 people there, and they had like 6 doctors, and they was going to be there a week. And there was no way they could get to all these kids, and he was so touched when he went out in the crowd, and he began talking to the parents and the kids, and some of them had growths, this big around on their face, and just hideous things that was wrong with them, and those that got to be operated on and received healing from the operations. But he went out in the crowd and began to think, what is causing this? And so he began to do research, and he learned that it was the water they were drinking was so contaminated, these parasites would get in their faces and in their body and cause all these gross disfigurations in them. So he said, I think Larry preached the other night on the deal where there's a book called Three Rivers. And these people that live down below this waterfall, they noticed one day that a baby was floating down the river. And y'all heard this story? Read the book? Okay. And so they went and got the baby out of the river and took care of it. And pretty soon there was more babies floating down the river. So they got all the babies floating down the river, and they get more babies and more babies. And so they built this huge infrastructure, all these deals to care for all these children that's floating down the river. And finally one guy, he said, why don't we go up and see what's causing all these babies to be floating down the river? So they went up there and found out the cause. I don't remember what the cause was. But anyway, they found out the cause and stopped it because they met it at its source. So this guy, Scott, said, I'm going to do something about this drinking water. And he started a charity called Charity Waters. And his symbol is, he's got 6 glasses, 5 with clear water in them and 1 with mud in it. So he said, I want to purify all this water with all this mud in it. So he started this, and I think a well cost him $5,000. And he started this, and he's dug hundreds of wells. I don't remember how many he's dug. Totally changed his life, and he became totally changed and became somebody that was helping instead of somebody that was destroying lives. So if we can convert, if God can convert, and we can help him, drug dealers, a banker, a marketer, okay, a supplier, okay, he knows how to purchase stuff. He's all those things. So God can take all those talents and use them, because I've asked him before, why don't you quit selling drugs and come work with us, and you can save lives instead of destroy them. Okay? So do that. So anyway, he did this, and people give money. Sometimes one person will give enough to dig a well, and sometimes it would take several to dig a well. But the way he raised most of his money was he had birthday parties. Say Betty's going to be 39 next birthday. Okay. we would have a birthday party for her, and everybody that came would give $39. Okay? And it would go to the church. All right? So it was a unique idea. So this one little girl in California, she was 9 years old, and her goal was to raise $500. So she had this birthday party, and she only raised $300. And she was so devastated and so disappointed that she didn't raise the $500. And the next day, her mother and her were driving down the freeway in California, and they had this horrific wreck, killed the little girl. She never realized her dream about raising $500, because she said, next year, Mom will do it. But they started a fundraiser, raised $1 million. The tragic thing is the little girl died, okay? But her dream lived on. In a large amount that she could not even probably visualize. So the dream never dies. The dream never dies. So dream on. Dream on. Pass it on. Every time I do a funeral, which I like to do funerals, not because people are dead, but because when you bury them, they stay buried. When you marry them, they don't always stay married. All right? But anyway, that's just a joke. But anyway, when you go, your dream lives on. So don't ever think that I didn't get to complete my calling. Did Moses get to complete what he wanted? No. He did not get to take the children of Israel into the promised land. But Joshua did. Okay? So I don't know who you're designing to continue your dream. Maybe they don't even realize it yet. But live your life so that your dream is contagious. Okay? I want to be contagious. I want everywhere I go people to catch what I've got. All right? Sometimes we isolate ourselves when we get sick in the natural. But if you're in God, God lives in you and all his power lives in you, spread it. Okay? Now, you don't always see immediate results. Okay? There was a lady that came to Four Rivers when we started that. She was a retired school teacher. She was a severe alcoholic. She was 60-something years old. And she come into my office and said, I'm an atheist. I said, well, good. I love atheists. And she said, I don't want to hear anything about God. Please don't mention God to me. I said, okay. Don't come to any classes because you hear about God. But we had what we called the butt hut where people sat out and smoked. Okay? And she sat out there a lot and she smoked and talked to people. And after about 3 months, she came to my wife and said, you know, I feel different. She said, what has happened to me? And my wife said, well, I know what's happened to you, but you'll figure it out. And then about a week after that, she came to my office. No, I was out in the butt hut, and she said, come here. And she said, you know this prayer thing? I love it. She said, I never prayed in my life. She said, I said a prayer 20 minutes ago, and God has already answered it. So she went from being an atheist to being a super Christian, I guess you might call it, or a citizen of the kingdom of heaven, and we didn't ever mention God to her. But she caught what we had. Okay? What was that one guy that said? Witness for God everywhere you go, and if necessary, use words. All right? I work in construction all my life. I go on a job, everybody be cussing, carrying on. I wouldn't say a word to them about it. And pretty soon, everybody stopped cussing. Okay? That's what God does. That's a power that is within you. I mean, talk about the Holy Spirit here all the time and the power it gives you. That's what it is. You have an aura around you that just flows around with you. And everywhere you go, it embraces people. And let that Spirit of God move in their lives. So God bless you tonight. Thank you for listening to me and coming out tonight. And may God bless each one of you. May He keep you, give you power and glory, love, especially love. Love what destroys everything that comes against God and everything. If we don't respond with somebody jumps on us and we respond with love, takes away the anger, doesn't it? Takes it away. So we can do that. And I think all of you here are so wonderful. I think this is a wonderful place, a wonderful church. And God has got all y'all here, and He's preparing y'all for the great growth that you're going to have in this place. Okay? Lining y'all up, give you talents, and as T.D. Jakes used to say, get ready, get ready, get ready. Get fired up and ready to go. All right. God bless you. Let's stand. Father God, we just thank you for your blessings tonight. Let your word penetrate each heart and accomplish the things you designed it to accomplish tonight. In your name, amen. Go ahead.